Today we're exploring what healthy boundaries feel like, not as concepts, but as sensations in your body. We'll start with a short visualization, then we'll move into intuitive mark making with art materials. There's no right or wrong way to do this. It's just about noticing.
Welcome to Chiron Art Therapy. I'm Maggi Colwell, an art therapist and Jungian. Here we explore archetypal images, personal symbolism in art and dreams, and what your psyche is trying to tell you. If you're ready to dive into your inner world, you're in the right place. Subscribe, and let's begin. We're going to talk about boundaries today, which is one of my favorite topics. We talked recently about Saturn, which got into that a little bit, but we're going to go at it from a different angle this time. And I thought we could start with a guided visualization, and then I'll have art directive that kind of goes with that and expounds on it so that you can explore it in a different way. So first way will be sensing your body and visualizing. And then the second one will be more exploring materials and exploring intuitively how you feel about things and thinking through, how does this apply to me? I will also say with any of my prompts, it doesn't matter what it looks like. This is about you connecting with your ideas, wrestling and struggling with the materials a little bit, exploring how you feel about things. We're not looking to post this on the internet, on the wall, or get grades. It really is the exploration and the wrestling with it of where you're going to get something out of it. And sometimes that even happens further down the road. That thing I was struggling with the other day, that feels just like this in my life. That feels resonant with the same kind of energetic pattern with this social interaction or with this emotional feeling quality, that kind of a thing that can pop back in and give you a new way to look at something that's happening often in your life, but you're not noticing it until you slow down and play around with the materials. The way your patterns work with your emotions, your thought patterns, your relationship interactions, it's going to be specific to you. So we can play around with what that feels like, but I reserve that sort of thing to working individually with people so that we understand what your particular symbol set and how that's playing out in your life. So there's always that limitation for this sort of setting, is that we can't get super specific to click it exactly into place with your pattern. And that's the kind of thing that we do in therapy as well as in dream analysis, is looking at how do we apply that pattern just right, like an old key when it finally clicks and you're like, I felt it set into the lock. It's like that's how it feels when you get the pattern just right so that it clicks. I'm going to start with a little bit of a visualization. One of the ways that I do this for myself is I will light a candle and I'll put it on the other side of my desk or on a table, sitting close to me, but not right on top of me, but thinking about it being over there a little bit more than arm's length to be able to have an exterior focal point. And I find that a flame feels very lively, and it's something that kind of catches my attention in a way that is a focal point that can connect my energy. So if you want to try this on your own, that might be a way to do it, is lighting a candle and having it outside of your personal space as a exterior point. And you'll know what I mean as we get into this. Take a couple of deep breaths at your own pace. I want you to settle into your own sense of how your weight is sitting in your chair, how your breath is rising and falling. Maybe you notice where your feet are or where your hands are, how that connects into your torso. Maybe you pay attention to how the breath feels in the back of your throat or in your nose. or even awareness of your eyelids. Think about allowing your consciousness to scan between the top of your head, the bottom of your sits bones. Where do you want to call your center point today? Maybe it's where you have a lot of sensation, like a tightness in your shoulders. Maybe you have a sense of heart-seatedness, or maybe it's more of a place in your head. It's consciousness, the thoughts, or even that place of stillness in the basin of your belly. And just call that point your center and say your name silently into that point. The next layer that I want you to pay attention to would be where you consider yourself ending in space. Is that your skin? Maybe that would be respiration of your skin and your breath, of how each breath moves out from your body. Maybe it's your heat signature or your electromagnetic signature. Maybe it's what you consider your personal space, your personal bubble. But play around with that and see how far you consider you existing in space. So you play with center and circumference, the center and your edges. And see how your awareness shifts between that center point and your edges. The next point that you would play around with is that point outside of yourself, the candle flame. So then you have center, circumference, and other. How does an outside point change when you think about that relating to the inside point? Now breathe into your edges. Allowing that central point to stay steady. When we make note of how we feel, what our boundaries are, what our personal space is, what our sense of self is, and then we can tell when something's pressed against it or interacted with it. When two people come into contact with each other, it's like clouds of different colored water vapor interacting, and it blends. Some people have really big energy. And some people are very reserved and careful with how their energy affects other people. I'm using energy very loosely here. You can call that words, emotions, tone. People who take up space and people who don't. So it can be a physical thing. How people smell even affects us in space together. And we all fluctuate too, like weather. So our fluctuations interact with other people's fluctuations. So having felt into that a little bit, remember that central point, circumference, my outer edges, and other. I'm going to shift into giving you some guidelines for how to turn this into an art activity. So if you were to draw this sense of yourself in the center of a piece of paper, maybe that would be writing your name, drawing a dot, putting a little figure, symbol, doodle, something that represents you, or maybe it's a stick figure. It could literally be a little drawing of yourself. And thinking about what edges you need, what's non-negotiable, and that would go on your inside, in your core. So you draw yourself, you draw a shape around yourself that's your impermeable boundaries, your non-negotiables. And then outside of that, think about the boundaries that shift. One thing that came up for me is I'm okay with some people touching me and other people I don't touch. So there's physical boundaries there. But it could also be about privacy or what you share, the distance we keep people at. You can write that, you can draw that, you could draw how much space you want between you and other people. So you could do that symbolically. Maybe they're outside of a fence. Or maybe it's more about colors, where different colors would represent different things. So that's what we're going to play around with. I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has. I also want to give my art therapy rules, which is there's no right or wrong way. So if you have an idea, run with it. It doesn't matter what I think is the way to do it. This is about exploration. It's not about filling in the blank or multiple choice. It's just a suggestion to get you started. You also don't have to know where you're going to get started. Sometimes the playing around with it teaches you things in the process. Most art is experimenting, throwing it out, and doing it again. The other thing is when you talk about yourself or your art ability, try to be kind. It's so easy to be kind to other people and not to ourselves, and it would be nice to bring ourselves into that same level of compassion. Any questions, I'm happy to repeat myself or give clarification. Okay, I'm going to give it 15 minutes to start playing around with this. It's I recognize and appreciate that what we're doing here, it doesn't have necessarily a direct linear connection between the visualization and the art. It can, but doesn't necessarily. It's speaking to two different ways of consideration for what we're looking at. So if it isn't obvious how they're connected, that's okay. There is a lot of feeling into not knowing and exploration with these type of things. For me, that's been an important part of my relationship to art therapy as well as Jungian philosophy, is layering things that have a relationship and a resonance, but it might be a tangential relationship rather than a direct linear relationship. And sometimes that kind of dissonance that doesn't already box you into a very narrow way of thinking will actually open it to an additive type of an exploration rather than a reductive one. And this is something that is not encouraged in our culture. We're supposed to give no matter what, and having boundaries is a problem. But we need boundaries. That's one of the reasons I actually draw with markers. Is once you put the marker down, if it's not perfect, too late, and you just accept it and keep going. So there's no perfect if I'm drawing in markers, because there's no erasing. It's just, you put it out there, you do what you do, and it is what it is. It always means something, and specifically relating to how you respond to it. Like, what does that meaning have in your response for it? Not what I think it means, but how it hits you. Yeah. Yeah, but I feel mistakes. Oh, no. There's no such thing as forgetting. That's your unconscious doing something to you. So it's, what do you make of it, is my question. It's about your interaction with it rather than the outcome of the drawing. Of holding things loosely and not worrying about the outcome and just being present. When we discredit our own needs, it comes out as anxiety. When we're able to hold our boundaries from an internal centered place, then we have an alignment with ourselves where we can say, oh, this is a boundary I need to honor. Because there's a voice that starts from inside instead of the Did I do enough? How are people going to respond to me? Rather than managing people's outside responses, then it's, oh, you actually know what the edge is and when it's pushed too hard. I spent a lot of time this morning trying to think about how do I talk about your outside boundary? Because we think about our skin, right? But our clothing is another boundary. And we all do have heat signatures and scent and an electromagnetic field and our personal bubble as different ways of looking at where do I end? Nothing reinforces that more than somebody standing way too close in a conversation. Like, oh. So my hope for everybody is next week is you give yourself enough space. Whether that means time, personal space, that edge of leeway. Yeah, it's a good way to think about it, is leeway. How do you give yourself leeway? Is that what your leeway is, your exit strategies? My first career was risk management, and we always talk about having egress, clear egress. It's how do you give yourself clear egress? Do you have a statement? Do you have I'm going outside and taking a break? I've had situations with difficulty family members that I'm going to drive myself, because if I have to leave, I'm going to leave.